we go. So for those of you that were at our live 3 minutes ago, then we lost Karen. She disappeared into the abyss. She's back now. And I warned her, I said, if this happens again, I'm going to come spank your bum, but then we're done. So hopefully it doesn't happen again. I'm going to start this whole thing all over again. Hi, welcome to day 2 of From Health to Happiness. And this is interview number 6 or 7. I don't know. I give up. And this is my dear friend, Karen Gibbs. Karen lives in Australia, and I have known Karen for about 7 years. I've known her for a really long time, but this is actually our first time that we've even met in person, if you will, and actually spoke. So I'm really happy to actually be talking to Karen. And before we get into all that whole, welcome, Karen, I just want to give a big shout out. And I did this earlier, but I got to do this again. I just want to give a big shout out to all of the people who have been watching the lives up to this point, who've engaged, commented, shared, sent love, all of that stuff, to all of the women who have been sharing up to now. Thank you so much. Your support and encouragement and your kind, loving words are amazing, and they mean a lot to the presenters, because it can be hard to talk about trauma. So all of these women are reliving their trauma and sharing their stories with you, and also sharing their healing journey. And for me, that was the most important thing. When I was speaking to the women, I said, it's the healing part that's the most important, because we want to help people heal, those people around the world who are watching, who may be going through the trauma that you have been through. We want to know how you healed. So I'm going to stop there. And I have Karen Gibbs here with me. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Karen, so much for agreeing, for volunteering. You were actually one of the first women to go, me, I have a story and I want to share it. And I knew exactly what your story was, because I remember the day that your tragic incident happened. Karen and I met in a Facebook group of entrepreneurs, like-minded entrepreneurs who share blogs and inspirational poster quotes. And it was a very small group. We were a very tight group. And I met Karen in that group, and she came in the group one day with her tragic news, and she needed somebody to take over her page for a while. So I did as best as I could. And then the rest is history. So I'm actually just going to shut up right now. Welcome, Karen. Thank you again so much. And please just tell us a little about, we're talking about the loss of her son. Was it Maddie was your youngest son?
Yes, my youngest son.
Youngest. So we're going
to almost 6 years ago, he passed away. Yep.
Wow. So we're going to talk about the tragic loss of Karen's youngest son, Maddie. So I'm just going to hand the floor over to you. And if you could just tell us a little bit about what Maddie was like before the day that we're going to be talking about. If you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Firstly, just thank you, Eva, for doing this. And the reason I put my hand up first when you put out the call was because I wanted to support you, because of all the support you've given me. Thanks. Although we don't know each other like personally, we don't live in the same place, but yeah, you've always been a support to me. So, and this is wonderful what you're doing, helping women heal. So. Yeah, so it's almost 6 years ago, my youngest son, Maddie, passed away in his sleep, very unexpectedly. It just was one of those things that you just did not see coming. And at the time, he had been struggling with depression and anxiety for about 12 years previously to that. And he'd come to a point where he decided he needed to help other people heal, and that was going to help him heal. And he had some really good ideas and things that he put in place to help other people. He was on a bit of a mission fundraising at the time to try to get a group together. He wanted to help a group. He said he began with, let's say, 5 people that struggled with depression, and he wanted to get that group together to help them. And his 2 main points were, for what he found in his life, firstly, to help the person who's struggling not to go into a downward spiral into alcohol or drug use to cover the depression, because that's you just end up in a far worse place, even though at first you think it's helping. And the second part of his mission was to help people who have, you know, a loved one who's struggling with depression, for them to know what that person needs. Because the thing we found is, and I've been guilty of it too, is you just think it's something in them, they need to just pull themselves together, which is absolutely not the case. And it causes so much harm to the person struggling. So Maddie's goal was to try to help people to understand what the person needed and to help the people themselves who were struggling with depression.
I didn't know that. That's amazing. That's
Didn't
really,
you?
I didn't know all of that, all about. And I actually, to be perfectly honest, I didn't even know that he just passed away in his sleep. I had no idea how he died.
Yes, yeah, it was in his sleep. He literally he'd been ill for a week though before. I go into the sort of the background of it in my book that I've just written, which is to help people. You know, that's my main mission for that book, to carry on Maddie's work. But yeah, he just had been ill for a week, bad pains and what have you, and couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. And then he went to sleep that night and was found at 9 o'clock the next morning. And he just looked peacefully asleep, they said. I mean, I wasn't there. So that was the only thing that kind of gave me a little bit of comfort, that he didn't suffer. That was the only thing. He just died in his sleep. Yeah, just awful.
So you said he was sick the week leading, like, was he
Yeah,
just?
Matthew had a really bad reflux problem, like really bad stomach problems. And it was something to do with that. But there was no real cause of death. Like, he had to have the autopsy, which I didn't want to happen.
Right.
But at first it was I said no. I was in total shock when it all happened. And then my other kids, I've got 3 kids older than Maddie, and they came to me and they said, Mum, we don't know what happened. What if it's something hereditary? Well, of course, straight away then I was like, okay, I can't risk that for the other 3.
Sure.
So yeah, it was just he died in his sleep. And at first I always thought God took him. That's for a reason, for whatever reason. And at the time, anyone who's suffering a loss like that, especially if it's your child, because it's something you never expect to happen, you sort of have to find your own way. You need hope, you need to hold on to something, but you need to find your own way to deal with that. And I, as I say in my book as well, I am a woman of faith. So I had that to hold on to, but you don't need to be a person of faith, but you need something in your life, and you have to work through it with that hope and, you know, something to hold on to get you through, because it is such a
that still has to be shock. That's exactly what I mean. That still has to be really hard in itself. Just to one day, you know, your son died in your sleep, and you, like, there's no answers and there's no reason, no rhyme. I mean, that has to be like the worst blow ever, Karen. Like, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's why I mean, again, I've sort of documented all of this in my book, because my book's not about depression. My book's not about grief or losing a child, but because Matthew was on this mission to help people with depression and anxiety,
I love that.
I felt that I had to continue his efforts. It felt like, because he had always said, if even one person, he can help heal one person, then his suffering wasn't in vain. And he always said, no pain is a waste. He always said that. So I just felt, it took me a while. I mean, this is nearly 6 years and the book has just been published last month. So it's not like I just got straight in and wrote a book. I mean, I was wiped out for a couple of years, I'll be honest. And I still find it difficult. There's always this loss. I feel this loss all the time. But there's, you know, you need to move on and you need to be grateful for what you have. And I think I just, you know, for Matthew, he was trying to help other people. So it became a legacy for him, for me to be able to continue that. And because that his mission, I've put that into the book. So it's to, you know, help people that have a loved one suffering with depression, but also what the person with depression can do. So I couldn't do what Matthew was going to do,
Right.
but I could write a book. So that's what I did,
Right.
to get that message out. And it just feels, it gives me a sense of comfort, I suppose you could say, that now his life, what he was trying to do has had a purpose and it's been fulfilled in a different way to what he planned. But
Right.
that's neither, you know, it doesn't matter which way it was done, it's still the message is there. And in turn, that helped me to heal. So it's just one of those unusual, I suppose it's a bit unusual the way it's happened, but
So, right. So actually, I think it's great because you wrote a book and your platform, you can reach a global audience. I mean, you can
that's right.
help everybody
Yeah,
around the world. So that's amazing. So you can use your
yeah,
talent and your voice in a far better, bigger, more beautiful way. So, and I think that's great. And I would love a copy of this book, by the way, but you can't mail it to me because we don't actually get mail in Guatemala. So I'll take if there's an ebook version of it.
yes, there is. Yeah, it's
I'll,
online there.
I will
Yeah.
take that. I would love to get that. So talk us through, if you can, if you don't mind, a little bit about what the grieving was like for the whole family, not just for you. Because I mean, there's brothers and a husband and
Oh, yeah.
grandparents, and there's a whole family involved in it. So tell me what that grieving was like. Because I mean, this was a major shock.
Yeah. Well, for me, when I look back on it now, I feel as though I was disassociated, I suppose you could say. My book starts off, this is my book for anyone, Stop the Downward Spiral.
I'm going to
'Cause
drop a
this was,
link. Yeah, thanks, Karen.
yep,
I just want, I am going to drop a link in the Facebook thread.
yeah,
For those of you that are watching, I'm sorry, we can't see the comments, so we're not ignoring you. We cannot see your
no,
comments.
we'll look at those later.
We'll look at those later, but I am going to drop a thread, a link to Karen's book and all her stuff in the Facebook thread. So you can please go and check out her book, buy her book, check out her stuff. Sorry, Karen, go on. Carry
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. So at the beginning, I start the book with the day I got the news that Maddie had passed away. So, and then because that sort of sets the scene for what I'm trying to do with his life's work, what he's trying to do. So in that, like reliving that, I realized that I completely, you know, you act in a different way to what you expect when
I bet.
I'd always said if one of my children die, I would die, or I would just lose my mind completely.
Right.
But
Right.
it seems as if I just went on functioning, you know, but really I wasn't there in what I was doing. And I felt like I was right high up above my life looking in. And
Right.
so I think now that's like a disassociation, but I mean, I don't know all that psychology
Sure.
thing. Like to that point.
What about the rest, like his brothers and your husband, and how was everybody
Yes.
else?
Yeah, well, it was such a shock to everyone. And so still to this day, I mean, this is in October, it will be 6 years, but the sister, he's got an elder sister and two elder brothers, and they're all still struggling in their own way. And it's caused a lot of depression, funnily enough, in the family, because
Right.
it's one of those things you really, as I said before, have to work through in your own way. So for each of us, it's a different journey. And it's been just absolutely traumatic for everyone.
Right.
But they're all just working through and doing it their own way, you know.
Right. So did you go to I just want to talk about the grief just a little bit, and I really do want to talk about the healing journey. Did you all
Yeah.
go to grief counseling together? Like, so hang on a second. So Maddie was suffering from depression or something. So was he in counseling did he have therapy of his own before this? Like, was he in therapy?
Matthew, for 12 years, like he tried lots of different things.
Okay.
But then he came to the conclusion at the end that the thing to do is embroiled around connection and adventure.
Oh,
And this is what he was trying to do, was to get a group together to have an adventure, which he goes into. Well, I write it all out in the book, in the last section of the book, where the adventures he went on. He went overseas at one point with family to, a country, the Solomon Islands, actually, where they really have to work hard for everything they do. And you'd understand that where you are, Eva.
Yeah, right.
Yes. And it's different to our Western culture. And Matthew sort of realized, wow, this is just, we need to look at things from a different perspective. And he just came up with his different ideas of what he was going to do. And he made a plan, and he was putting that plan into place when he died.
So he took on a more natural, proactive healing all on his own.
Did.
Then. Good for him.
And that's right. But he had made the massive mistake of covering the depression with alcohol.
Oh, no.
This was his main message of what he wanted to get out to other people. Don't do that, because it's going to be so much worse. I go into the things he says in the book and how it affected him and what that meant to him, and how he was trying to save other people from using his mistakes, saving other people from going down that. He called it the downward spiral, which is why I named the book.
And that's
Stop the downward spiral.
And that's exactly what it is. It's a downward spiral.
It is a downward spiral. And at first, with alcohol, the problem with that is it's socially acceptable, firstly. It's easy to obtain, secondly. And so anyone that's in that really dark place where they feel they're isolated and they are hurting, it's very easy to reach for a glass of wine. You can even feel like you're in with the group. Everybody might be having a glass of wine, but you're using it for a different reason, you see.
And nobody would even know. Nobody would.
And nobody would know. See, they try to hide because of the stigma. This is the problem. And they feel like they've let everyone down. They feel like, we might look at someone with depression and think, oh, just pull yourself together. They need to do something, such a miserable person or whatever. But they're really hurting and suffering and struggling, and they need help. They need support, and they will try to hide because of that stigma, because of the labels that we just put on them. It's been like that for as long as I can remember.
Yeah,
because you just think it's up to them. It's their choice, you think.
Yeah.
But it actually is not a choice.
And it's like you said, just pull up your pants and get over it, and brush off your, and it's not that. It's got nothing to do with
nothing
that.
like that. No. And they're trying their best, but they will feel isolated, and they will want to just feel like they can fit in, just like you. So more often than not, the first thing they reach for is alcohol. But then if you keep going down that path, it becomes an addiction, and then you're in a real mess.
Yeah.
And this was the state Matthew got himself into. And he had the biggest heart, and he knew when it all happened, he knew what had happened, but he felt trapped in there then. He said at one point he felt like he was in a deep black hole, and he could see the light right up at the top, but he just couldn't reach it. Aww. That was how he felt. And I think we kind of need to understand how someone who's suffering like that feels, and it's not just what we might imagine, but we've never been in that position. We can't really judge, and we shouldn't judge.
You can't even pretend to know what it feels like, though. I mean, we can't even imagine. I mean, and I know, like, personally, just to talk about being in a deep, dark black hole, when I hit rock bottom 8 years ago after I left my relationship, I mean, I was in a deep, dark black, and you can't explain that to anybody.
No, you can't.
You can't explain that feeling of you've just been swallowed up by this hole, and you really just want the world to end. And you can't explain how heavy that is. Like, you have to go through it to really understand the magnitude of that, because it's crippling.
That's exactly right. Crippling is a very good word. That's very, very much explains how it is for them.
Yeah, and
because I was so close with him, trying to help him through it, I felt all that, and I could see all that. And of course, when it's your child, you do think differently. It hits your heart a lot more. And but he had literally, it was a more natural approach that he tried the medications, they hadn't worked for him, they caused different side effects, and I go into all that in the book. I explain all how he felt with it and what his views were. And then what he decided to do was go into rehab and get rid of that crutch of alcohol while he was busily trying to fundraise
good.
for this plan to help 5 people. So he had just not long come out of rehab, but he came out early because he thought he was better. And they had him on different medications, which we've learned now. The last text he actually sent was to his boss, because for that whole week he couldn't work because he was in pain and he couldn't sleep. There was no sleep. So he sent a text to his boss and said, thank you so much for your support, that helping me, not pressuring me that I couldn't come to work. He said, but they were right and I was wrong. I have to go back to rehab. That was his last text. And he died that night. So we found out later, one of my elder sons went to the rehab people and spoke to them, and they said this happens very often, which is another thing.
I bet.
Although Matthew's not here to warn people of that, I know he would. So I've put that in my book as well. I know he would want people to, don't think you're better and assume you can do it on your own. If you're in rehab, finish the course, stay the course. Because they say quite often people come out of rehab and they actually die. They don't make it. It's a thing. I was absolutely shocked, because if I knew that was a possibility, I would have had him at home. I would have done a lot more.
Right.
And I say in the book, there's no good with what ifs. Everything, to me, it's happened the way it's happened, and we now just have to do the best we can with what's happened.
Right.
And as I say, I can cope a lot better because of my faith, and I believe in the resurrection, and I believe I'll see Maddie again. So that gets me through.
Right.
That gets me through,
So talk us a little bit about your healing journey, because I know for a couple of years you were totally disconnected. And there comes a time in any grief, or trauma, no matter what it is, there comes a time where we actually have to start the healing journey. Like it's somewhere you have to take the first step and go, okay, I can't stay in this grief any longer because it's consumed me. So now I need to start healing. So when did your true healing journey really start, and what did your healing journey look like?
Well, it's not a thing that you actually plan, or like you've just said, we don't, I didn't say I can't stay like this forever. It was a thing. I literally gave myself grace. I said to myself, this is the worst thing I've always felt in my life that could ever happen to me.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to even try to, like, the journey of grief that they say, the stages of grief, I didn't find it to be that way.
Okay.
And I just said, I'm going to try my best to be thankful, look outside of myself, to be grateful. Even small things like he didn't die in pain, he died peacefully, was such a blessing.
Right.
I mean, you don't say losing your child is a blessing, but because there was no pain for him, and he didn't even know, the coroner said he would never even have known. So that is, to me, an absolute blessing. And I just thought, well, I'm just going to heal in my own time. I'm just going to go about doing what I'm doing, try to look out to other people. Whenever I saw other mothers that had lost a child, I reached out to them so that what I was going through could help them. And that helped me as well. And I just literally lived like that. I didn't make any effort to, I've got to get over this, because that was the one thing Matthew was used to say anyway. And the funny thing is, depression and grief have the exact same symptoms. Okay. And I write that in my book, because you go to a doctor, which I went to my doctor many times, and he said, you've just got to work through this in your own time, even though he said, I don't know how you're still standing. Like, losing a child is just awful, but you need to just work through it in your time, how you will do it. And there's nothing can be done. But, you know, if it's the same symptoms as depression, they would be then giving you antidepressants, but they don't for grief. And this is where I say they say you have a good reason for your grief, but I say you have a good reason for depression too. And there's always a loss at the beginning of the depression.
Right.
It's all your struggles through life, which we all have, that build up, but then there'll be one big loss of a relationship, loss of a job, loss of a loved one, something.
Right. Yeah.
And you will sink into a depression. And if you know that, it doesn't sound so scary, because really it's a natural part of your life, and you just need support until you come through the other end. Right. And that's really, I just gave myself grace and time. I rested. I just reached out to other people. But I couldn't go online, as you know. I couldn't do my page and that sort of thing, which was my way of helping people. I couldn't do any of that. I just had to kind of heal within myself. And it was just one day, I think it was about 20 months later. And I just, because the grief sort of, it does come in waves. There's no doubt about that. The wave will come up and you feel like you're drowning in it. And you allow yourself to feel part of it. And then it becomes too much and you kind of shrink back again. That's how it was for me. Okay. And then I would just have to sort of go along again. And then that grief would rise again. And it kept coming like that in waves. And each wave, I was able to accept it a little bit more each time. That was how it worked for me, until one day, I literally, and I write about this in the book, I was out in the laundry and it just came to me, and I was looking up to the sky and the grief just hit me. And I literally started screaming Matthew's name, screaming. And this is 20 months later. And that was the turning point for me. I think that was when I let it all out, and I was screaming like, I must have sounded crazy. Lucky we lived on 20 acres of land. Nobody could really hear me. And that was when I started writing. So that was the journey for me, but there is always hope. Always hope.
That was my next question, was when did you actually decide that you were going to write a book and sit down and start the book? At what point did that happen?
Yeah, I had always wanted to do that, because like literally it was 3 days later. I knew Matthew was he used to write a lot. That was one of his, because journaling is a thing that helps in healing. And he would write a lot on anything. He didn't have journals. He would write on serviettes, paper towels, pieces of art paper, anything. So we had gathered up all his belongings, and it was all in boxes in our lounge room. This was only a few days after he passed. And I woke up in the night. I go through this in the book because I'd had a bit of a shock that day. And I reached into one of the boxes and pulled out, and it was one of his writings called The Afterlife.
Oh, wow.
And it just felt like he was speaking to me from the grave, really. And I just cried and cried. I mean, I was crying constantly at that point. This is only a few days later. Yeah. And that was when the idea first hit me to get his writings together, but I just couldn't do it. And for a while, I did try to push myself a little bit, but then I thought, no, I was writing, but my writing kept getting caught up in my grief instead of Matthew's message. Right. So really, I felt there's two books here, really. I just let it work in its own time. And it came to the point where this book was born, and it's sort of the grief and the depression and how to heal is all combined in the book. And awesome. I'm getting really good feedback from it, that it's really helping.
I can't wait to read it. I'm super excited to read it. We're gonna wrap this up, and so I just want to ask one question that I've been asking all the women during their interviews.
Yep.
If you had one golden piece of advice or a tip or a tool or something to share with other moms who are grieving the loss of their child, what one thing, most valuable piece of advice could you give them? Could you share with them right now?
Okay, the thing that comes directly to my mind is what I've been saying. Give yourself grace. Don't think that there's a a grief pattern that you're supposed to be following. And if it's not happening in those times, you know, the stages of grief, don't
Right.
feel there's something wrong with you if you're not going through the stages as they're written down, basically.
Right.
Give yourself grace and time, because that child is part of you and will always be part of you. And you just need the time to really heal in your own way and try to look outwardly from yourself, but rest up as much as you can and look after yourself. That's not being selfish. You know, you're needed for so many other people, and you just need to look after yourself first and heal as best you can. That'd be my advice.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your story and your loss. That I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You know, I'm going to share something with you that, of course, you would never know. That every now and again, like over the years, and it's very, very random. Like I will think about you and what happened, and I still cry over that
Yeah,
because I remember that day, and
I know.
I was sobbing that day. Like I had, because I
Yep,
only have one son, right? And I was like, I couldn't
I
even
know. Yes,
imagine what that would feel like. And I
I
still, to
know.
this day, still cry when I think
Yeah,
about you and your story. So you are always in my heart. But thank you so much for sharing your story. I am going to drop the link. Please do check out the link for those of you watching. I'm going to drop the link in the thread here to her book. Please pick up her book. Buy her book for somebody if you know somebody who's suffering. Go and check out her links. Karen is an amazing person. Thank you so much again, Karen. Please do keep
thank
in
you, Eva.
touch.
Oh,
Uh,
definitely.
and I send you so much love from Guatemala. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eva.
Thanks.
You're amazing.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye.